to the part of the meeting where we have public comment for items not already on the agenda. Is there anybody who would like to speak on anything that's not already on the agenda? Nope. Okay. Then we will move on to reports, and our first report this evening is from Chief Sutter, the August police report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just have some very brief comments. I just wanted to...
You might want to get closer to the mic. Some people are too hot and some people are not.
Is this better? I just wanted to point out a couple highlights from the Safe Neighborhood Activity Report, just as a FYI. You'll see that we did our annual school huddles. I don't know if you may have seen that in the report. Just want to kind of explain what they were. They were born from the strategic plan, if you remember. And this is where we go to every school that's willing to participate with us and have what we call a huddle with the administration of the school and the faculty that they want to involve, and we discuss pertinent events, issues, safety with regard to their specific school, and ways that we can be more involved, how they want us, and we make these our response to each school. So it's been received just absolutely tremendously by the schools. I recently had a meeting with the superintendent of schools, Mr. Cochran, and the relationship is going really, really well with regard to the police department and the schools, which was one of our overreaching goals in the strategic plan. And really, I just wanted to bring attention to that Safe Neighborhood report as a whole, that they're really doing some tremendous work in there that we're trying to capture and spread the word to the community on, for everybody to take advantage of their services and of the department.
Great, thank you. Ms. Howard?
Thank you. Chief, a couple questions. Starting with, I saw some good news. Patrol and dispatch overtime were down after we had highlighted the concern there, but detective overtime continues to be up. And is that can you attribute that to any one particular factor? Or?
Yeah, that continues to be, again, with our the way we staff and respond. It's always after hours, and it's very random the way that it occurs. So that overtime is specifically related to call-ins for cases. And what will happen is if you have two detectives that have to come in for a serious event after hours, that will tremendously, relatively speaking, spike the overtime, because we normally don't incur it. So that overtime tends to fluctuate a lot depending on call volume.
Another thing that just piqued my interest, being a parent of a teenager, was that under the juvenile crimes, there's a bunch of things by a 14-year-old. Is it the same 14-year-old, or obviously we're not going to be talking about names.
Yeah, that caught my attention too. It's not a crime wave. It's relative to a specific person that we're trying to deal with.
And you have a plan.
And we have a plan and lots of different resources involved. And again, just a reminder that juvenile justice system is all about intervention and help, and not punitive in any way.
Of course, with the 14-year-old in particular, right?
Yeah. So as it results in sometimes taking, when there's a safety issue or a welfare issue, it results in taking the juvenile into custody, but that then triggers a bunch of other resources that come into play that get him or her help. So, we're definitely working on that.
Well, thank you. I think that sounds like the right approach, and I'm sorry to hear that. That was troubling to read about the actions. So one more substantive question, which is that many people probably saw yesterday's New York Times. The cover article in the magazine was about body cameras in the national debate and lessons from places that have adopted body cameras. And it's something we've been talking about here for some time, and we've been considering it as part of our ongoing efforts to strengthen relations with the community. And we've always talked about body cameras as having the dual benefit of increasing transparency of police actions, but also providing records so that if we ever have incidents that we need to go back and review, it actually can be productive of the officers themselves too, because you have a record. But we've always sort of seen two barriers to adopting body cameras. The first has been cost. We've talked about, and I think we're going to be talking about in the context of our capital budget. Even if we think it's a good idea, is it worth the cost, and what are the opportunity costs if we do it? What else could we be doing with that money? And the second has been, what policies do you have surrounding the body cameras, especially regarding privacy, the privacy of our residents? And so that to me, this article really brought home all those issues. And I know the way you've talked about it, but I think given now this high-profile article, it would be important to revisit it. You've talked about the need, if we do adopt them, to really involve the community in adopting those policies, because you want the community to understand what our policies for what we're taping, when we're not, what we're retaining, what's accessible to the public, all of those things that, obviously you're capturing people at their most vulnerable often. So I don't, did you see the article, and did you have any reactions to it?
I did, and, wow. What at first blush seemed very straightforward and logical becomes much more complicated, as outlined in that article. And I recently, just by chance, saw Kathy O'Toole from Seattle, who that article originated from her department, speak on this topic. And they were basically, the number one study that's been used in implementation of body cams was from the Rialto, California Police Department. And they did this extensive study that correlated the use of force and citizen complaints as they relate to police actions prior to and after implementation of body cameras. And they showed that both dropped. And that was the go-to study. This study contradicted that to some point and in some aspects, and then certainly brought these other very complicated issues to light. In my opinion, in order for the public to have trust and for the department to have legitimacy, we have to be transparent. And I still feel very strongly that body cameras are the next technological step in complete transparency. I really do believe that. In order for the public to have trust in our department, they have to believe in what we do and find our actions just. And I believe for Princeton, body cameras will show that in the overwhelming majority of the times, whenever there's a question of our conduct. And when we're wrong, it gives us an opportunity to fix it, because we can see it firsthand and see what needs training and what needs fixing. However, legislation and laws are lagging way behind technology. And I think that was illustrated in this article, and I certainly can conceive in my mind of records requests that could certainly jeopardize privacy and overwhelm the municipality with time and legal fees and such. I can see that. But with that being said, other departments, including the state police, are tackling it. So I think we need to, I've kept saying this over and over again, I guess we still have to proceed very deliberately, and we have to get good opinions, we have to have good research, we have to implement very strong policy prior to implementation. But I think these are challenges that we should work to overcome for the greater good. I really do believe that the greater good is served by the transparency aspect and people being able to see for themselves what we do and how we do it, especially when there's a question. And I find, I just very quickly, and I'll be done, is that, when I read and see a lot of the issues going on nationally, and I read things that, and I understand why, some groups say when police actions, many people expect police actions to be videotaped now. It's just whether it be videotaped by the members of the public or by the police. And there are groups that say when the actions are not captured on videotape, the action should be perceived as misconduct until proved otherwise. And that really resonates with me. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that's how some people do lack trust in us. I don't see it that way, but I sympathize with that viewpoint. And when I see that, it hurts all of us, because that's not how we think of ourselves. We have to prove ourselves, and this goes to this goes to the body camera, where all our actions will be caught, people will be able to see it. And again, I repeat myself, but we're not right all the time. And when we're wrong, this will give us the opportunity to train and fix it and be very transparent about it, which I think still develops trust.
And actually, the process of developing these procedures might be a further way to continue to build on that trust, right? Well, it's more food for thought. I'm sure my colleagues also have questions on that point, and I commend that article to everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a super interesting article, and one of the things I think it looked like one of the solutions was the algorithm that they were developing to get rid of the faces, to blur out the faces, and if that will help, that will help with the records request problem. But it did make, it was like an about face in a lot of ways. It was.
Ms. Butler?
Yes, thank you. I have two questions. One is not necessarily related to the police report, but several of us were made aware of an incident with a resident over the weekend, and I think there's been a complaint filed and you'll investigate, but one of the issues that came up was there was someone who became involved in the incident who identified themselves as a police person from another municipality. And I wonder if you could review for all of us, give us a little bit of a reminder of what authority police from other municipalities, including the campus safety police. That was an issue that came up when we wrote our ordinance that we wanted to, I think the ordinance committee wanted to include that, but because it was already covered as part of a state statute, we didn't include it in our ordinance, but people should know what authority other officers have.
Sure. So from a very high altitude, state statute covers jurisdiction and police powers. Two different statutes govern municipal police powers, one for municipal police departments, one for campus police departments. They're under separate statutes, but they say the same thing. And basically, again, in summary, police officers have the duty to react and respond to a crime committed in their presence anywhere in the state. So if I am dressed like this in West Windsor and a bank robbery occurs, I have every responsibility to respond. And if I don't, I'm actually violating my oath in those cases where there's a crime being committed. On all other instances where there's a threat to public safety, I have a duty to respond. A medical issue that occurs in my presence in another jurisdiction, I have a duty to respond. So that's covered by state statute, and it's a very gray line. Again, you have to contemplate all these things as they're occurring before you. You're driving down the road and these things are happening. You're with your family, and it's one of the pitfalls of our job, really, is that you're never off. On the other hand, we don't have a duty to be enforcing jaywalking in Jersey City so there's a nor would we want our officers doing that. So we do get trained in that. The statutes are fairly clear as it relates to crime and public and safety issues. But it's often you can imagine if I'm dressed like this and I'm in, again, West Windsor and have to respond to something going on, it can get messy due to lack of awareness, lack of identification, things like that. So we're trained in how to respond to incidents like that, but there's there's definitely a mandate on our response in certain situations, on or off duty, if that makes sense.
Right, but no one should sort of, for lack of a better word, blow off someone because they identify themselves as the campus police and you're not on the campus and you think you don't have to.
Yeah, my as I always tell friends and family, right, a person that identifies himself or herself as a police officer that's in plain clothes, and there's, the best thing to do is try to obviously comply, and if there's a question as to identity, you You comply, you get somebody with you, you call 911, and you get a local officer there to confirm. But certainly they do have authority to act in those types of situations.
So do you have to carry identification, though?
Yes.
Okay, so if the...
Just a minute.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Simon.
I think it's the same line of questions, which is basically, you also have an obligation, though, to identify yourself and provide that identification, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
I wouldn't expect you to just take my word for it.
Well, but members of the public, if there's ever any interaction where somebody claims to be a police officer, that individual must provide official identification.
Yes, we're required by department policies, and every department's the same way, and I can speak for this in the state, that when taking any type of action, we certainly are required to identify ourselves, absent,
Sure, absent immediate threat. Absent immediate threat.
Bathing suit.
Okay, so, and what you said, though, also, is if there's any question, then call 911 and have the local police respond.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the reason I bring this up is, in addition to the complaint, there's also been news stories that occur every couple of years about somebody claiming to be a police officer who turns out not to be and commits a crime.
Absolutely, and that's certainly been patterns of some criminals. It's no secret, nationwide for a while, that people will impersonate police officers, and your best practices are, if there's any, not to necessarily leave with anybody. If you're just engaged in normal conduct, driving down the road, and there's a question, you're certainly entitled. I've had people do it to me even in full uniform. They feel comfortable calling the police department for whatever reason. When I was a younger officer on duty, and you call the police department, we'll send another officer over. Okay. So, it certainly can be startling to be, I'm sure, to be approached by somebody in plain clothes and be informed that that person, that he or her is a police officer. I'm sure it doesn't happen to you every day, and you may want to confirm that. So, but with regard to jurisdiction and police powers, we do have the authority to act in certain situations when not on duty and in another town.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry, were you done? Or should I?
No, I had a second question, but if you want to go on about this.
Well,
ahead.
it's tangentially related and also maybe ties back a little bit to the body camera. There's nothing in our monthly police report, but in the annual police report, there is a table on internal affairs investigations and their disposal, and there were 32 last year, which works out to like 2.5 a month on average. And are all of those civilian complaints, or is that a mix of civilian and internally generated complaints?
Both. So if there's a internal rule violation, that results in an investigation. So something that violates, that we uncover internally, that may be generated by supervisors, say, some type of violation of policy and procedure, rule and regulation, any ordinance or state law, that's investigated as an internal affairs complaint. So what you get in that table and what we provide to the state every year, and this is all done by guideline, by the Attorney General's guideline, includes that, includes internal ones as well.
Would those guidelines preclude you from breaking those out so that we have a better information in the future about civilian complaints? Because right now, I don't think we have...
Civilian versus internal? Like
yes.
Department generated?
Yes.
Sure, we can break them out.
And just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, every civilian complaint will be in that table, or are some disposed of in a way where they wouldn't appear in that table?
So if a complaint, every complaint we get, there's a whole 36-page order we have, our own order that mirrors Attorney General's guidelines, and it's very strictly screened. So let's say somebody comes in, I'm just being very, something crazy off the wall that, the officer wasn't wearing his hat or her hat, nobody complains about that. Okay, well, that wouldn't arise to misconduct. We would take that complaint in writing. We would forward it to Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs would screen that and say, okay, the officer didn't have his or her hat on. It really doesn't arise to misconduct. It would generate a number as a complaint, and it would be referred back to the supervisor to be, you need to wear your hat next time you're getting counseling for not wearing your hat, as opposed to a complaint of something serious that would arise to a full-blown investigation, and proceed through the different stages of the internal affairs process. But every one of those complaints, regardless of what they appear at face value, get a number and get screened.
They do get a number.
They get a number and get screened. Every complaint that comes into the police
And so when you say get a number, that means they're in the table, even if it's
Yes.
in the column that says unfounded or administratively closed?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I think the breakout, civilian versus internally generated, would be helpful.
Ms. Carmiller?
Well, can I
I think Jenny wanted a
it was
question.
just a
along
quick
those
question
lines.
about the ID, because I might not be the only person who's curious about this. What does the ID look like when you're off duty? Is it that, like, two things in the bottom part is a badge, like you see on TV?
It's a badge. It's a Princeton Police Department badge, exactly like we wear in our uniform.
Uh-huh.
And it's a card that looks exactly like a New Jersey driver's license that has all of our identifying information and characteristics. Badge number, department, assignment, rank.
And all police officers in the state have the same
They may
thing?
appear differently in their appearance may be slightly different, but all the general identifying information is on those cards. For instance, our ID right now is different from the ones we had in our two separate departments prior, but just on some of the insignias and things.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So my second issue was that on Sunday, October 16th, we received an email from Lieutenant Toole about forwarding to us a Princeton University Department of Public Safety timely warning about an attempted robbery on Alexander Street. And I noticed he forwarded also their tips to their university students, I guess, on how to handle various issues, and one included reporting suspicious behavior or activity immediately by calling the Department of Public Safety, and then they give a number that's not 911 but a regular telephone number, and since most students are probably not from the 609 area code, it would mean that they'd also have to dial 609. And I'm just wondering why they don't tell their students to dial 911. And I happen to have it on pretty good authority that if you are on Alexander and you dial 911, that you get police dispatch. And this seems to be an area that we cover, and why don't they tell you to call 911? People are in danger.
I will talk to them. I don't want to answer for them. I'm assuming that wherever that, and this is really an assumption, I don't know, that where that message is generated from, that's the format they use on that email message. But I certainly can speak with them to either, tailor the messages when there's something like a robbery that you should call 911 in an emergency, or make that part of the, if they're willing to do so, make that part of their every announcement they put out. I actually have a meeting scheduled this week, so we'll discuss that.
Well, so I'm also interested in the fact that their population, the university population, would have known this, and since we don't look at I don't know how this goes out to them in some sort of blast, or whether it's, did it go out in an email blast, is that it? But it did occur in Princeton, and we don't have a similar way to notify our residents that there might be
Yeah, well,
in the area.
Their community is certainly more reachable for them through, their communication means, as it's, slightly, obviously smaller. That particular incident that you're referring to was reported to them much later than it occurred. So I believe, I don't know, I have the exact information in front of me, but it wasn't as if it had occurred and there was a person on the loose at that particular second perpetrating the crimes. Not to argue your point in any way. I agree with what you're saying, and we'll certainly pass it on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Wait, can I bring up one more issue? I'm sorry about this. This has been an issue that Councilwoman Crum-Miller has brought up, and you and I have heard about it a little bit in some issues that we've been discussing with people. Jenny has expressed concern that sometimes police get caught in issues that may appear to be racially motivated, but we get neighbors, residents calling saying there's someone suspicious in my neighborhood. And police then often find themselves in the awkward, I guess, position of having to perhaps sort of interact with people of color who, who may or may not be not of that neighborhood at all. And there are people that think that in some way we ought to go back and follow up in some fashion with people who make complaints like that we think are more a reflection of their own racial bias than they are of a real danger to anyone. And could you talk a little bit about why we don't do that?
Sure. It is true that we often respond to, one of our major pieces of our service is that we respond to calls that are called in for a variety of reasons, and certainly we do find ourselves occasionally called to scenes that turn out to be not what somebody maybe either thought they saw or perceived. Sometimes people do file false police reports and things of that nature, and that's our duty to investigate. So, first of all, completely filing a false police report purposely would be a crime. So if we were able to ascertain that somebody purposely called and stated something was happening and it wasn't, that's something completely different than somebody saying, I think I saw a person in distress over here by this person. And then we get there, and, it's important for the public to know, too, when we get that call, we have, a duty and obligation to talk to those people. Now, often, it's not often, but sometimes, it's not what the person thought they saw, and it really does end up reflecting negatively on us, because it looks as though we came into a situation, as you were saying, either based on a ethnic or racial bias of some sort, and that's the perception that occurs. However, we have it's our job to uncover that quickly, efficiently, sympathetically, and professionally, and to try to leave that situation when it's not what the person perceived in a way that makes people understand that we were doing our job and that we try to do it in the least intrusive nature as possible. We don't have any authority to go and in any way investigate, scold, or anything else, though we may feel a certain way. If we can't prove that somebody called in something false and they just perceived it that way, we certainly have no authority to go back and speak with that person in a scolding manner. And we also don't want to get into a situation where we, on the totally other spectrum, where we're dissuading people from calling in something that truly is something awry. Most of from time to time we have burglary sprees that go on, every community does. And 9 times out of 10, those are solved by a neighbor or someone driving by that saw something. To see something, say something. However, what you just described is a unfortunate byproduct sometimes of what happens. So I would really say that as uncomfortable it is for us and a problem it is for us, it's really our officers' job to go there and deal with it sensitively and understand what's going on quickly and try to make that situation right. It doesn't always turn out that way, though. Does that answer your question?
Call.
I'm sorry?
When in doubt, call.
When in doubt, I absolutely call.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Simon?
So, in previous reports, you've mentioned that I think it's Rutgers is doing a study
Yes.
to help us assess the racial fairness of our process and our ticketing. So, what's the status of that?
It's just concluding as we speak. We got notified on Friday that it's being concluded and that they're going to be contacting us on reporting those results to us.
So what does that translate to in terms of when we should expect to see it here?
Well, I have to set a date where they're available and we're available, and the manner in which it's you want it reported.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I just wanted to publicly thank the police and the EMT squad that came out on October 21st. There was a gentleman who collapsed and stopped breathing at the Arts Council, and there was a life that was saved by our folks. So I want to
Thank you,
thank
Mayor.
everybody for that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.